Hello, welcome back to another episode
Back to
of
my
Excuse-
baggage.
Yes. Welcome
Yes.
to Excuse My Baggage. Thank you, Dad. My name is
Love it.
Shayna,
I'm Rutgers Mo, also Paul.
and today we have a very exciting episode where we are going to be talking about the
How do you know
art
it's
of
exciting
bullshit.
if we haven't even discussed it yet?
You know what? Fine. We have a very boring episode lined up today, so might as well
You
just
don't know it's
exit out
boring
right
either.
now.
We have an
have it- I'm
interesting episode, maybe.
That's a better adjective. I don't even want to put an adjective in front of it. We just have an episode. Let's just say that. We have an episode for you today, our sole listener, about Bullshit Ability 101. So
How do you spell
basically
soul?
today.
S-O-U-L. It's an S-O-U-L listener, someone with a lot of soul.
Soul listener.
It's a different spin. I just thought I'd throw that in there for a moment, okay?
Soul listener.
Just getting
I like that. Well,
warming up. A soul
warming
listener.
up.
Yes.
To our soul listener. Basically, we have a episode for you today. Not exciting, not interesting, but
Existential. Right.
from this episode, we hope that you are able to get a little takeaway about how it's okay to not have it all figured out in life. So regardless if you are in your 20s, if you are in your 30s, if you're 78, none of us know what the hell is going on, and we are literally all just faking it until we make it, using the art of bullshit ability, and it's okay to not have it all figured out. That's basically the premise of today's episode. So,
Okay.
my dad is self-proclaimed king of bullshit. Would you say that's correct?
No.
Okay.
No, I would not. I'm not the
Why?
king of anything. Because
You're the
you're setting
court
you're
jester
setting-
of bullshit?
No, you're just setting me up for failure. I don't want to do that. I think that I
Okay.
have the ability. I have
exactly.
the ability to wing it when I need to, but there's people who can wing it. So what?
Yeah. And you're
fine.
one of them. Beautiful.
Where are we going with
So-
this? What happened?
Where we're going is I would like you to define what bullshit ability means. So growing up, you used to always tell me in situations where maybe I was fearful, I didn't really know what was going, let's say there was a test I didn't study for back in school and I was kind of freaking out about it. I feel like the advice that you would give me in that situation is bullshit it. Just pull something out of your ass, come up with something. I don't know if that's necessarily always the best advice. Like kids, you should study for your exams, like take notes, like go to school, do well. Not saying I didn't study in school, I did. But sometimes there's situations where you just might not have a clue and you have to use the art of bullshit.
There's
what
a
is
lot of
bullshit-
times I don't have a clue. And
Yeah.
yes, that's a good point. What's funny, I want to digress for a second because it's
Go for it.
Connie and I, my girlfriend Connie and I
Yes.
were
Your
watching.
Pesto Enigma, which we're going to have to dive in. You used that in one episode. I have no clue what the hell that means, but your
Well,
significant other, your girlfriend, your Pesto
Pesto
Enigma.
Enigma, right. So we started watching a new show called AP Bio. Have you heard of that?
I started watching that too.
What,
Really?
last night? Oh my
No,
God.
I've been watching it for the last week.
Listen to the guy who's the teacher, right? What has he been
Yeah.
saying? Yes,
Basically, the whole premise for the show is he's a Harvard professor who's teaching AP Bio at a high school in Ohio, and he's not teaching AP Bio, he's just bullshitting his way through the class and just coming up with random stuff because he doesn't want to be there. But the
Right.
whole theme probably is that the kids are going to take more from the class than they would have if they were actually studying AP Biology.
Yeah,
Maybe.
probably not. But in either case, you were telling me and the sole listener that I used to tell you, just use your BS ability and don't worry about it. Having confidence does help. Years ago, back at Rutgers, I remember having a discussion with a physics major. And I asked him, what are you studying these days? This was back in the late 60s. And he told me that he was studying antimatter. And I was basically like, what is it? He was trying to define it to me, and it doesn't matter what his answer was. I didn't understand it, and he didn't do a great job defining it. But regardless, I said, well, what happens if they ask you a question and you don't know how to answer it? His answer was, well, you might respond with something like this. That's a really good question, and it's thought-provoking. However, a better question would be, and then answer it.
Wow, yeah, if someone ever asks you a question and you don't want to answer it, just give them the other question.
Well, watch the politicians. They never really
That's
answer,
what they do.
is it up, is it down, is it sideways? No, none of that crap. Whatever the heck you're going to ask them, they wind up answering a question that they want to answer, and it has nothing to do with your question.
So a synonym for bullshit ability is essentially confidence, more or less.
You need confidence to pull it off.
but-
You got to believe in
Yeah.
yourself that you can basically get through it. But the other side of the coin is you really don't know what you're going to say. You haven't thought
Yeah.
it out. You're just winging it.
Where were we? Well, getting back, I have a question for you that I'm curious to hear about. So, have you ever stretched the truth or outright lied to land a job or an opportunity, and how did that turn out?
Well, not so much to land a job. I wound up basically lying my way of getting out of a job that I hated. I couldn't stand it. This was in the mid 70s and I had a musical group. Wazoo, that's a plug. There's nothing that we have that's recorded,
Do
but
they exist anymore? If anyone looks up a lawsuit, you're
no,
plugging something,
I'm plugging
doesn't
something that
exist.
doesn't exist. Of course, why not?
Maybe someone take the name Wazoo and give new life to the band, but your
Yeah,
band was Wazoo. Yeah.
Wazoo. And we wound up getting an offer from the Orange County Fair. So the group was getting something like $30 a day, which there was three of us. We had no bass, no drums. It was me and two guys, and we weren't very good.
You were bullshitting your way through
We were bullshitting our way through the
Wazoo.
musical thing. Yeah. Regardless, what happened was I was working down in downtown Long Beach and for a leasing company. What they did was they started off by saying, "Oh, you're wonderful. We want you here." And you wound up getting something like 20 paid days PTO time. Well, I wound up between March when I was hired and July when I was fired. That's my contention, by the way. I didn't quit, I was fired. But what happened was I refused to go to work. I kept taking days off. And eventually I wound up coming up with something like dandruff. And I figured that I needed to exaggerate the truth just a little bit. And I said that I had terminal dandruff to my
And
boss.
that's why you couldn't go into work,
That's why I
is because
couldn't.
you had
Terminal dandruff.
terminal dandruff.
Terminal dandruff. And my boss
And does
thought,
terminal mean, like,
yeah.
life-threatening?
Well, it was pretty
Mm,
bad. You can still see I have a lot of white hair and terminal
yeah.
dandruff. But regardless, he basically challenged me on that issue, and we wound up going to administrative law court. By the time we were done, I got out of the job. I contended I was fired. They contended that I quit. It was a constructive voluntary termination on my part.
This is all because of terminal dandruff.
I needed time to show up at the Orange County Fair. My group was playing in the daytime. Oh,
Wazoo, I mean, yeah, you got
Wazoo,
priorities.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah. Huh. And one thing I do find interesting about this, though, you got psoriasis later in life,
I
right? Like,
know. Yeah, karma.
what?
That's karma.
Karma. There's a funny story about that. If you remember back in high school, I lied to a guy I liked by saying that I liked sports and I knew a bunch about football when I knew jack shit about football. I told him I was really into sports because I know he was. And then he started texting me about sports. I had no clue what the hell was going on. So I had you text him or tell me what to say.
What about it?
I brought it up because, long story short, this guy ended up finding out that he was basically talking to you because of another friend who knew this whole situation and she told him. So, point is just don't lie.
Well, make sure there's no bitches who can rat you out. That's what happened. You got ratted out.
I did.
Yeah, you
I
did.
did get routed. I mean,
Lying is the hamburger helper of truth. Think of it that way.
what do you mean by that?
I don't know. It's basically
Okay.
stretching the truth. What's hamburger helper? It takes meat,
It
whatever it is,
stretches
and
me.
stretches that meal out so that it's more plentiful. Lying is an embellishment. Of course, when you stretch it too far, it can become dangerous. But sometimes
Yeah.
it's a white lie. Sometimes you do that so that you don't hurt somebody. How am I
Yeah.
looking today? Fine. Great. Super.
I mean, I did happen to tell you that you look pasty before
I did
we
look pasty.
started this. I could have lied and just said,
The background
"You
looks pasty, actually.
you look great, dad. You look great." Um,
I know.
but yeah, this all stemmed from you lied your way out of a job.
I did.
So thanks for sharing that one. An interesting point that this leads into is the fact that life just doesn't come with an instruction manual. So what's the
If it
hardest
did,
part?
if it did, I wouldn't have read it anyway.
True. That's true. You would have trashed it. But
Go ahead.
so then what's the hardest part about navigating life without a clear roadmap?
Life. It's actually
Yeah.
living it. It's actually
Yeah.
going through the changes and not panicking and not by the way, there's a lot of panic in all kinds of things that happen. So, when you look too white, you suddenly go, what does this mean? Why am I so white? Take a look at us. You look really healthy and I look white. Ghostly. What are the different things that you need to know? There's health, there's legal things, there's relationships. There's a certain pecking order to what we need to do. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You have to take care of food, shelter, clothing. Eventually, when you go up the pecking order, you eventually wind up with something called self-actualization. What the hell that is, God only knows. That's absolute bullshit. But it's interesting. And Maslow, I think, is correct. You really can't be thinking about these intellectual, philosophical, psychological issues if you don't have food on the table, if you don't have a place to stay, if you're cold, if you don't have clothing. So I think Maslow is one of the people who actually figured it out. I didn't. I just, I liked what he said. Dylan has a really great line. He said, "It's all right, Ma, I'm only bleeding." And one of the lines in that song was, "Those not busy being born are busy dying." That's a good line.
Mhm.
Not my line. It's Bob Dylan's. But I like that a lot. I think he's absolutely right. It's a good observation to make.
That is true. There's this quote. So you've heard of YOLO, which is you only live once, right?
Boom. Well, now I have.
Well, okay. Well, this was a popular expression, I guess, with the Zoomers. I don't even know. Popular expression back in the day. YOLO. It's you only live once. Screw YOLO because you only die once, but you live every day. And every day you got to figure out what are you doing? How do you take care of yourself? How do you be a good human in society? How do you be a good daughter? How do you be a good father? There's a bunch of things that we're constantly figuring out every single day. But you live every single day until you die. So dying's the easy part, I guess. Living, that's a little bit more challenging. It's you got to figure out just how to live, how to live. But I think you're doing a pretty damn good job, Dad.
Okay. I'm trying to figure out where you're going with this. You
Well,
went on some kind of
sometimes
philosophical
things don't
rant,
have
and
to
I
go
did too.
somewhere. I know. Sometimes I go on philosophical rants. Sometimes you don't have to go anywhere, and
Well,
you just
just
have to go along with it.
why don't you just
But
go and
next
go?
question.
Yes, go ahead.
Have you ever felt like you were faking your way through life or work, like you didn't necessarily deserve to be where you are? And how did you kind of deal with those feelings?
Well, when I was working in medicine after I got my master's, I was the administrator for a medical group. I had no idea really what the hell I was doing. It was an 8-man group. It took about another 7, 8 years before I finally figured out that being a consultant and going from position to position because people needed help. They needed help when you asked them the question, "What's wrong?" And they would tell you what's wrong. Then your job was to say exactly what they said so that they thought that you knew what you were talking about. People would ask me within the company, "What is it that you do? We can't quite figure it out." And I said, "Marriage counseling." And I wasn't joking, actually. Two of the guys didn't like the fact that the third guy didn't produce a lot of income. The other guy thought that they were doing overutilization. What does this have to do with anything? I'm not sure, but in either case, that's what I remember. And what I did more than anything, it wasn't working out budgets, it wasn't working out new formulas for dividing income. It was basically making sure that the two guys didn't attack the one guy, or that the one guy didn't pull a move like I did and come up with terminal dandruff and leave because they couldn't replace him. So that's it. I'm not sure what the question was, but that's my answer, and I'm sticking with it. Go next.
Next, okay. Well, I guess the whole premise of that was kind of diving into the whole imposter syndrome situation.
You have imposter syndrome until you don't. You have imposter syndrome until you figure out that a lot of people sound like they know what the hell they're talking about, and a lot of them don't know shit. That's just the way it is. Adler had a theory, and that was the superiority inferiority complex. And as I remember it, acting superior was actually a ruse to keep people from realizing that you were inferior, because deep down inside, you felt like you were faking it. So
Mhm.
my own observation is that I was faking it for about 8 years. I mean, I had no clue that I was faking it. I had no knowledge of really what I was supposed to do. Looking back, I can see that I really had a lot of things to do. But regardless, the point is that not everybody always understands at the moment where they are, what they have to do. How do I get out of this situation and go to the next? So I'm going to get out of this situation by saying I'm done with this answer and we're moving on with more baggage. Next.
Thank you for that. With that being said, I feel like I talked to you a lot about imposter syndrome, and that's something that in my early career I have struggled with a lot, even back in college. So, college and my first two jobs after graduation, I always felt like I had this thing of like, I like, I'm here. What's going on? Is there any advice I guess you could give to me or to anyone else that's going through a similar thing in the workforce? Just how do you overcome those feelings of inadequacy or doubting yourself, even though you might be, and you probably are, fully competent and capable? How do you overcome those feelings of doubt?
I'm not sure that you do. You go from day to day, week to week, month to month. And if you're working for somebody else, the validation is, so to speak, it's that you're still there. You haven't been fired. You're still getting raises, whatever the heck it is. That's fine. But the reality is you're asking a different kind of question. And you can't take somebody, I think there's an expression, you can't take an old head and put it on a young body. It doesn't work. So whatever my advice is isn't really all that relevant to you or anybody else. Each person will come to their own conclusion. They will all figure out in their own time, their own way, what works best for them. It may be that that job isn't the job that they should be in. Maybe they should put more energy into that job. Maybe they should put more education into it. Maybe they should just do something completely different, artistic,
Just say you
musical,
have terminal
whatever.
dandruff and quit if you need to. Use that.
Terminal dandruff is a good cop out, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. And um yeah, I mean, at least ways that I've been tackling it has literally just been the whole thing of confidence. And sometimes you just got to show up, do your job, do your best. I'll say that because even if you don't necessarily know what the hell life is, what even is life, I'm not trying to get philosophical again, so I'll cut it. But if you just give everything your all and do the best you can, I think that kind of carries over into confidence and overcoming imposter syndrome. Cool. So, there is advice that is floating around that creating and embodying an alter ego can help you handle challenges with more confidence. So, if you had to create an alter ego, who would they be and how would they approach life differently than you do now?
I'm not sure I understand the question. A better question would be, who have I been? When I used to play in a musical club in Long Beach back in the early 70s, I used to go by the name Paul Accordiano because I played accordion. When I speak to one of our mutual friends, Nilo, and his family, I'm Paulino. When I've been on the Rutgers board, I've been Rutgers Mo or just Mo. When I'm talking to my relatives back in New Jersey, I'm Cousin Paulie. All of those are components of moi, me. And I don't think of them as separate entities. Are you saying that somebody is putting on a mask and they're assuming
Not
that alter
necessarily a
ego?
mask, but it's
Well, let's
more of if the whole expression that change won't happen without change. So if you are unhappy with your life at the moment, you can't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results. You have to change things up somehow. So, some advice that is thrown around a little bit is if you don't like where you're at this moment and your current headspace, then get yourself into the mentality of someone who isn't you. If I'm unhappy being Shayna, I'm unhappy with the existence I'm living in now, then put an identity to someone else and become that version. And what would that version do? And then think of it that way. So I guess that's kind of like the question and the answer.
It's a good
The question
question.
is the answer. That's
It's
a
a good
quote, I think,
question,
from
but
a
it's not one that I want to answer, nor do I really even
oh,
understand it. I know what the hell you're talking
cool.
about.
No one does, I guess, at this point. Basically, advice to my future self, if you're not happy where you're at in life at the moment, then think, what would the version of you do that is happy? And then do that.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Nice job.
Cool. So, can you share a moment when you felt like you completely lost your confidence? And what steps did you take to rebuild it moving forward?
This podcast.
You felt like you lost your confidence with this podcast?
Yes, I think I've lost my confidence.
Really?
Yeah. I don't think we can go
How
on.
so?
There'll be other podcasts, but my confidence in this podcast on BS ability it's getting low. I probably need some sugar, candy, cake,
As
cookies.
in your blood sugar's low?
Well, it could be. It's either that or terminal dandruff. I'm not sure.
Okay. Um, Well, just keep faking it. I don't know. What would Paulino do? What would Paulino say?
Ciao. That's what Paulina says. Ciao.
Cool. So, on the flip side, this podcast, Excuse My Baggage, has increased my confidence. I will say that. I think 2024 was a really tough year for me, and my confidence took a nosedive at the beginning of the year. So, little story time. If you recall, I was dating someone at the beginning of the year, and this was the first guy I dated in a really long time that, like, I genuinely thought he could be the one, like, the one. And, unfortunately, when that relationship ended, my confidence took a nosedive to the floor, and, while in a lot of aspects it was kind of a mutual situation where we both just kind of knew, like, "Okay, I don't think this is gonna work out," you know, I bid him adieu, yada, yada, yada. Afterwards, I realized that a big part of what I missed out of the relationship was who I was when I was in the relationship. And that relationship brought out a side of creativity that had not been brought out in years. So,
Is
when
this
that
why you're
relationship ended,
is this why you're playing the sax now? You're
the
learning it.
saxophone?
Yeah, you're learning how to play the sax. Do you think these things are related? I'm trying to see where this is going.
Well, it's going somewhere, but
All right, go ahead.
saxophone came in because of the foot injuries and needing new hobbies and confidence, and yeah, it kind of all does go hand in hand. So one thing I think, tidbit of advice is if you're trying to rebuild your confidence, try something new. You're probably going to be shit at it to begin with, but bullshit your way through and recognize that when you start something new, the only way you're going is up because you're probably going to suck to start off with. So you just got to keep getting better. That's the only alternative. I mean, you could get worse, but like hopefully you get better. Point is, Shayna's dating life, my confidence was kind of busted for a while there. And it kind of took, some traumatic life events, aka my foot injuries that I had back to back, to realize, oh my God, I need to shape up, damn it. Advice from you.
Mm.
And what's something I could do to respark that creativity that I loved so much when I had that relationship? And then lo and behold, you wanted to do a podcast. I was like, okay,
This is
1
my
plus
fault?
1 equals
Wait a
2.
minute.
This is your fault,
I
basically.
okay, I'm just trying to understand where you're
So,
going with that.
um, basically, this podcast, this helped me to regain my confidence in a lot of ways. And a funny story, though, is if that didn't happen, the whole title, Excuse My Baggage, came from a date that I went on post breakup with another guy. So here's a little story time for you. So post breakup, I put myself back out there. I was trying to meet other people, got to kiss a lot of frogs, as you like to say. And I went on a date with this attorney, and he came from a family of doctors. So well-educated guy. And while we're on said date, he proceeds to tell me about his picture perfect family and how he's looking for someone that will be able to go to the country club with his parents and that their family will be able to go to the country club with his parents. And one big happy country club family. And in my head I was thinking like I don't necessarily know if I'm what you're looking for, broski. And I've also learned we all have shit in life. Going into relationships, we all have our paths, right? But I'm not one to quickly be like, let me tell you my entire life story on date number one. However, he did happen to know that one, you and mom are divorced, and he did know that I lost my mom to cancer when I was in my early 20s. And so he knew that little tidbit of info. He found that out, and he proceeded to ask me, I don't think your family is going to fit in too well at the country club with my family. To which I was also just kind of like in shock, where I was like, you know what? I know this isn't going to work, but excuse my baggage because you know what? I think I handle the shit that I carry very well. And I don't let my baggage weigh me down, nor do I let it weigh anyone else down. But excuse my baggage. I'm not going to the country club anytime soon. I wish him all the best with whoever he finds that hopefully can go to the country club with him.
It may not have been you. He was making an assumption also that your relative, in this case me, doesn't fit in with the country club. He may be right. I don't know where that was going,
What
but that's it.
But yeah, point is if you lose your confidence, it could be refound. Um Period end. My last question I have for you is imagine this. You are a world renowned Rutgers professor standing at the podium in front of your class, Bullshit Ability 101, when suddenly your phone rings. You've been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. What is the groundbreaking discovery that got you here?
Cure for terminal dandruff.
Well said.
Thank you.
Love that. With that being said, I hope that you do not suffer from any more terminal dandruff outbreaks in the coming days. I'm excited to talk to you again in episode 4 and bullshit our way through that as well, day by day.
Sounds good to me.
Day by day.
Love you.
Okay. Love you too.